Good morning, a good Chodesh, a Freilich Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh Adar today. Havalim Latova. Should be a wonderful month, a month of Yeshua, a month of Chaim, Bracha, Simcha, Parnas, Berevach, and Yeshua's Bekarov. This should be a wonderful month ahead. Um, okay, today's shir is Perek Gimel and the Maseches Beitzah, halfway through the Masechta. Only a short Masechta, it's only 5 prakim. Today's shir is Lila Nishmas, Aaron Nachum, and Simcha Cohen, Yeshua Mordechai B'Sheps, and Bracha Sarah Shmuel Leib, Yinan Moshe Ben Yosef, Ben Eshnos, Lav and Aliyah, and before Shlema Ada, Sarah Bas Leah, Chana Pesel Bas Yanti, Yisrael Ben Rachel Leah, Rachel Bas Pesel Zelda, Avram Yitzchak Ben Risha, Chaya Bas David Bela, before Shlema B'Soch Shar Chali Yisrael, and as a schus for Natali Tzvi Ben Rivka Blima, and Shalom Yehuda Ben Chaya Sar Mindel, Schaefer, Bracha, Vatzlach, and Ruchnis, Ubimagashmas, and all their endeavors. Okay, Perek Gimel talks about different activities needed to provide meat on Yontif. Okay, even though we're allowed to do malacha for Achol Nefesh on Yontif, not all malachas are permitted for that purpose. We started talking about this a couple of years ago, but this is the main part of it. So, Ein Perek Gimel Mishnah Aleph Ein Sadin Dagim and Habiborin Yontif. We may not trap fish from a pond on Yontif. This trapping is a malachas asur on Yontif, even for the sake of food. They notice that the name is zonas. Normally, we put food in the pond for the fish, since they can find what to eat on their own in the pond. If you do tashlich Rosh Hashanah, you cannot throw bread into the water. You're not allowed to feed the fish on Yontif. We may trap wild animals such as deer and birds from small enclosures in which they had been placed before Yontif. These animals are considered fully trapped in these enclosures, so taking them from there is not in malachas. They're already in an enclosure. But notice the name is zonos, and we may put food in their enclosure for them at Yontif because these enclosures do not contain sufficient food for them. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Lo chol habiborim shav." Not all enclosures are the same. Zeh klal. This is the rule. Chol hamechutzer tzida aser. Any animal still lacks trapping because the enclosure it is held it is so large that one must still chase the animal to catch it. It is aser to be taken on yontif. V'she'enu mechutzer tzida mutter. Any animal does not lack trapping because the enclosure is small enough that he could just reach out and grab it. It is mutter to be taken on yontif. Mishnah Beis, but um, uh, okay. So as we discussed in the previous days, something that's going to be used on Yontif, you have to set aside. If it's not set aside for its use on Yontif, then it's called mukta. It may not be used on Yontif. So therefore, animals that have been caught before Yontif, that they're caught in a trap before Yontif, they are not muksa if they were intended to use them on Yontif. Um, so now we're going to talk about what has to be done with animals found in traps on Yontif. Traps for wild animals, birds, and fish were set before Yontif. Well, you told me hem beyontif el inkin yodea shinitzodim erev Yontif. One may not take the cash from these traps on Yontif unless he is certain that they were caught before Yontif. In which case, if they're caught before Yontif, then they can be shechted and eaten on Yontif. However, if you're not sure that they were caught before Yontif, because they might then they might be muksa and muksa applies even in the case of suffix. There was an incident in which a particular non-Jew brought fish to Rabban Gamliel on Yantif. He didn't know whether and Rabban Gamliel did not know whether the fish had been caught on him before Yantif. The Amar Utarin Haim Elish Shein Risoy the Kabal Amen. And Gamliel said these fish are mutter, and they can be moved, but do not wish to accept a gift from this person. Um, he didn't want people to think that he refused to accept the fish because they were muksa. Therefore, he went out of his way to explain that they could be accepted. He did not want to take a gift from this particular non-Jew. Mishnah Gimel, Behema Misukenes. So if an animal is in danger of dying on Yontif and the owner wants to shecht it so that his meat does not become usher, lo yishchot, he may not shecht it unless there's enough time remaining in the day to eat a kazayas piece of roasted meat from it. Since it's impossible to eat any of the meat unless the animal is shechted, even eating the small amount is enough to justify shechting an entire animal. You can't just take off a small piece of a cow. You got to shech the animal first. Rabbi Akiva Omer Afil Kazayas Chai Mebeis Tivichasa. Rabbi Akiva says he may shech the dying animal even if there's enough time to eat an olive-sized piece of raw meat from the spot of its shchita, meaning from the neck. Shachta b'sadeh, if you shechted the dying animal out in the field, lo yevien b'mot of a mota. He may not carry it back to his house on a pole or on a stretcher because this attracts too much attention and is disrespectful to the honor of Yontif. However, he may bring the meat back limb by limb in his hand, even though this will require several trips. Mitzvah Dalit. Now we're learning about a bechor. Now a bechor is kodesh. A bechor of an animal. Obviously, bechor from a person is also kodesh, but a bechor from an animal is kodesh, and the bechor is a gift that's given to a kohen who must then bring it to the Beis Hamikdash as a korban. If the bechor sustains a permanent a mum kavua, a permanent blemish, it is considered unpuzzled to be offered on the mizbeach. However, unlike other kabbalas, a bechor with a mum can be shechted and eaten anywhere without being redeemed. It may not be shechted though until it has been examined by an expert to determine whether the mum is indeed permanent. So let's see. Bechor shenafal labor. If a firstborn animal became blemished, got a mum before Yontif, but it had not yet been inspected. So if it fell into a pit on Yontif and the owner is concerned that it may die there, Yehuda says, Yered mum chavir. An expert may go down into the pit and examine to see whether the mum is permanent. Because ruling on a blemish on a mum is not considered a ruling from Beitzah. If the expert determines that it now has a permanent mum, so that it can now be shechted and eaten, then the owner may raise the animal from the pit as shechted. Although this bechor is usher at the beginning of Yom Tov, said not yet been examined, it is not muksa because the Kohen was anticipating having it examined and permitted by an expert on Yom Tov. But if it does not have a mum kavua, a permanent blemish, he may not shecht it. He may also not move it because it is muksa. So it would only be not muksa if it had a blemish, and then he could shecht it. Rabbi Shimon says, "Kosh in mumonika yom." Any bechor whose blemish was not recognized to be permanent while it was still day, meaning before Yom Tov started. This is not considered prepared for shchita. It may not be inspected and matered on Yom Tov. According to Rishim, doing so is like judging a court case, which is asr Yom Tov. Therefore, even if the blemish is permanent, the bechor remains asr until after Yom Tov, and therefore muksa. Mishnah Hey, Behema Shemesa Lo Yizenim and Koma. If an animal designated as a korban dies on Yontif without having been shechted, it may not be moved from its place, as it cannot be eaten or fed to the dogs or used in any way. It is there for muksa. Maisa Vishalos every tire for the lev al hachalash and nitma. There was an incident in which a animal that's designated for korban died on Yontif, and they asked Ritarfin about it, as well as about Challah, which is two questions that became Tameh on Yantif and therefore Aser to eat. When Nichnas, the base of Medrash, was shown, Ritarfin was unsure of the Lacha, so he entered the base Medrash and asked the Chacham there if these items may be moved on Yantif. They answered him that they may not be moved from their place. Okay, now we're going to talk about buying meat on Yantif. I mentioned that a couple of years ago. This is what we're going to talk about. So you're not allowed to do business on Shabbos Yantif. However, it is mutter to buy food under certain conditions for that day, such as long as there's no exchange of money or its equivalent on Shabbos Yantif. So let's see how we're going to do this. Mishnah Vav. A group may not be formed in the first place on Yom to buy an animal by having each person agree to pay a certain price for a share of the meat. Although the Chachamim mattered buying an animal for meat on Yom Tov, they did so only when money is not mentioned. However, a group may be formed in this matter before Yom Tov to buy an animal on Yom Tov, which they may then shecht and divide among themselves on Yontif. Yehuda says, "Shokel adam basa keneged hakli or keneged hakofetz." A person selling meat on Yontif may weigh the meat on a balanced scale, against the utensil or against the cleaver, in order to determine the weight of the piece. The Chachamim say, "Ein mashkichim mechaf b'znan kol." You may not use a scale at all on Yontif. Period. No can do. Mishnah Zayin. A mashchizin as hasak b'yontif. One may not sharpen a knife or a whetstone on yontif. This is similar to tikkun kli, which is aser on yontif. You're fixing a utensil. But one may scrape it against another knife. But that's not the normal way to sharpen knives during the week. Lo yamar adam latevach shekol li b'dinar basar. Person may not say to a butcher, "Yontif, weigh for me a dinar's worth of meat," since he may not mention price on Yontif. But a butcher may slaughter an animal and have the customers divide the meat among themselves, meaning that with each customer taking a regular cut of meat without any price being mentioned. After Yontif, the customers pay the standard price for the pieces of meat that they took. Mishnah Ches. Amar, now that was we talk about buying meat. Now we're going to talk about buying other foods. Amar Adam l'chaveru malili klize avalova mida. Person may say to his friend Yontif, "Please fill this container for me with food or liquid," even though its volume is known. But he may not do so with the container that uses for measuring, since that's a weekday activity. Okay, so you can take a look at like a 32-ounce container, and you can tell them to fill up this container with whatever you need. And you know that container is 32-ounce container, but you cannot use a measuring cup to measure out 32 ounces. Yehuda says, if it is a container fit to be used for measuring, even if it has never been used in that way, he may not ask his friend to fill it. Ma'aseh B'Abishal ben Bitnis. It once happened that there was the Tana, Abishal ben Bitnis was a merchant. That he would fill his measures before Yontif and then give them to his customers on Yontif. In this way, he could sell them precise amounts of wine oil without being over on the isurim of measuring on Yontif because they're all pre-measured before Yontif. Abba Shal, who was another Tana with the same name, two different people over here. He says, "Ah, b'mayid oseba kain b'fnei berurei hamidos." He would do the same thing even on Chol Moed, which when measuring is mutter because of the foaming of the measures, meaning that to allow the foam to settle so he could fill the measure to the brim. Since he was pressed for time of Chol Moed, he would do this the night before. His name is Mitzvah Hamidas. The Chachamim said that he would do so even on weekdays because of the draining of the measures, meaning to allow the oil that he was selling to drain overnight from the measuring cups into customers' containers. Holich Adam Eitzel Cherven Heragil Etzlo V'Amali Tainli Beitzah V'Guzim B'Minyan. A person may go to a storekeeper with whom he is a regular customer and say to him on Yontif, give me a specific number of eggs or walnuts. Second. Give me a specific number of eggs or walnuts. Because it is common for a private person to count this items this way in his home. You could ask your wife or your kids, hey, give me 4 eggs in the fridge. That's normal, especially making kugel or schnitzel, whatever it is. Therefore, that's not a specific action or request associated with buying and selling, and therefore it's not usher as a weekday activity. Okay, that's all for today. We'll continue tomorrow with Perek Dal. Good Chodesh and Kol Tov.